Well, you might not believe it, but I was checking my videos, and I am approaching 100. That's right, 100 videos for Mikrowave1 Channel. It's hard to believe that I put that many videos out, but it just seems like there are more and more project ideas over the years that have come through my head, and I just wanted to record them. So sort of as a celebration of that, I want to do a kids project this time, something out of my childhood, understanding transistors and transistor projects. This is a Radio Shack book that I got as a kid. Of course, the Morgan book, the boy's first book of radio and electronics, that was in the library. I could not afford something like that, but we could certainly get the Radio Shack stuff. Also, I found one of my old notebooks. This is from when I was 15 years old. And what I used to do is find a book, like this book here, that had nice big schematics in it, at the library usually, and I'd take this acetate paper, tracing paper, and I would put it in the book, and I would trace the schematics. That is how I learned how to draw schematics, by simply copying them out of books. So this is like the papyrus found in the Dead Sea Scrolls for me, to have uncovered all of this stuff in a box. I mean, you should see all this stuff. I've got hand-drawn, copied schematics. Look at some of these. These are really interesting. Anyway, I have a whole folder full of those projects that I did as a kid, or at least looked at as a kid. And now here's my notebook. My notebook of schematics as a 15-year-old. And let me tell you, there's some pretty cool projects in here. So you guys have been waiting for a kids project. How about a beginner's project from the late 1960s, early 70s? At that time I got this book, Understanding Transistors. Understanding Transistors and Transistor Projects. So this is Allied publication right from Radio Shack. And along with the boy's first book of radio and electronics, which was in the library, I did not have a copy of that, and a few hobby magazines. I was playing with a lot of these circuits as a kid. As a matter of fact, this particular notebook is me at around age 16. And you can see I've got all kinds of interesting circuits that I've drawn from books. And if I actually built the circuit, there will be a little OK next to it. See, these are a couple of QRP transmitters made with one transistor. Isn't that kind of interesting? I found this old notebook, and it just goes on. It even goes into tube circuits, and it gets pretty involved. But one of the great projects, wow, look at this. I built this. This is my first super regenerative receiver, and this is the actual plan to it. Wow. Unbelievable. Anyway, this is my schematic diagrams. See, it's my social studies notebook. Yeah, 1972. So I would have been 15 years old when I made my first electronics notebook of circuits. Is that crazy? Look at this. Wow, a nice regen. 2-tuber. Not too bad. Oh, here's a good one. Wireless broadcaster for the AM band. That's kind of the theme of this video. We're going to build something like that, and we're going to try to build one of the circuits in the book. And one of those circuits was a wireless broadcaster. And the wireless broadcaster is always a popular book in these. Is always a popular project, because everybody wants to go on the air, right? So the wireless broadcaster is just a universally interesting project for a kid. You want to transmit to a radio, right? an AM radio. So in this little project that's in the Radio Shack Allied book, it's 2 transistors, a few parts, very few parts, and you build it with a masonite board, and you use an earphone as the microphone, and you have a stiff wire that you use as the antenna. Now, universally, these circuits pretty much don't work. So we're going to build it up just as they describe it in this book. And we're going to try it with the vintage transistors. Everything's going to be as printed. So we're going to build it right by the book. Everything just as they describe here, complete with a tapped coil, which is unobtainium. We're going to build one of those. And a masonite chassis. Okay, we're going to build it with a tapped coil, which you really can't get today, so we're going to build one. And a masonite chassis. Beautiful masonite chassis. And I've collected all of the parts. So we have everything that they call out here in the book. We're going to build it, see if it works, and if it doesn't work, we're not just going to make it work, we're going to update it using modern parts like the 2N2222. So this circuit can have life again in the 21st century. The bane of the 1960s project, the very Loopstick Coil. These things are almost impossible to find, and I've decided it's easier to actually wind them yourself. Just find an old TV peaking coil like this. It's got a good slug inside, and strip all of the windings off it. Get some fairly low-cost Litz wire like this stuff. This is 1046. And wind it up yourself. About 100 turns on just about any kind of a form that's got a decent slug in it, even one like this with a screwdriver adjust slug, will produce about 120 or 130 microhenries. And that, together with a 100 puff cap, puts you at the top of the AM band. And with the 330 suggested in this project, it puts you down around 700 kilohertz. For a tap, I would just go up about 25 turns. So if it's 100 turns on the coil, which is just scramble wound on it down toward the end, so when you bring the slug out, it's at minimum. Going up 25 turns, about a quarter of the way, will provide a good tap for almost any Hartley oscillator. So this is sort of a cool way of building using a masonite board as your chassis, and it's going to have some little bent metal props in the back, so it sits at about this angle, and then there will be an antenna attached to it. The terminal strip attaches right in the middle, and that's where everything is built off. And you know, things like the switch just poke through the masonite. It's a very clever method of construction, and we'll use that. So take your time and pause the video to read through the complete article on the wireless broadcaster, and then go through the parts list, which is in the end. It's funny, they've got the prices from Radio Shack listed here in the book, but I think you'll find that many of these parts cost less than what they are showing here because of mass production. Modern parts are actually cheaper than these older parts that were commanding some pretty big prices. So on the 2N107 transistors, I'm a little bit surprised that they used a 107 in the oscillator. It would work just fine as the modulator, and the audio would be just fine with the 107. But I'm going to be really surprised if the 107 operates as a Hartley oscillator in the broadcast band. But I'm willing to give it a try. Well, the parts have been collected, and that's what this first video was all about. Getting the vintage parts together so that we can exactly match the project that's in Understanding Transistors. And we're going to reproduce that home broadcaster and attempt to make a little bit of noise on the AM band with it. Then we will improve the circuit and use modern parts. Instead of a old-fashioned earphone working as a microphone, we're going to use an electret microphone from a computer microphone. Instead of the old 2N107 transistors, we're going to be using 2N2222s and properly biasing. And we're going to learn how to build one of those coils that seem to be unobtainium. Stand by for part 2, Home Wireless Broadcaster.